All right, so this is Michael Van Schaik, aka Mike Singer, founder of the Big Virus Hoax, HOAX, thebigvirushoax.com, and righteousarmy.org, and taps-pma.com or .org. Just doing another public open dialogue, discussing issues, just kind of shooting the shit, so to speak, tonight, shooting the breeze. Joseph Gibson from the Republic radio broadcast for the last 10 years is on with me, and he invited Mike, who's on. Most people don't join in until close to 8 o'clock. And we do have a few issues we're going to discuss, but right now we're just kind of shooting the breeze. And Joe started saying some things. I just wanted to start recording and give a little intro there and go back to
We,
what you were saying, Joe, about what the big talk is now out there in the mainstream with Trump.
well, we got a lot of people out there that believe in Donald Trump. We got a lot of other people in the Patriot community that don't believe him. But if he's talking about ending the Federal Reserve and restoring our money, that is the most important aspect of everything that we've stood up. The Fed and the Fed. That's everything. If you destroy their money and their capability to control the means of how printing our money, then we that's defeating everything that the globalists stand for. So if Trump's going against that, isn't he on the right side of what the people want, or at least what we want?
Yes, he is, but yes, he is. But remember, the last guy who openly talked about ending the Fed, what happened to him? That was JFK. What happened to JFK? Well, we know what happened to him. You know, so
A good point.
Trump has to be careful with this. Yeah, he's openly talking about it, but he has to be careful because he doesn't want to end up. Now, they've already tried several times to assassinate him.
Well,
All right.
we know, so we think, so we don't know for sure.
Look, here's the deal. Here's the deal with that. The first time they tried to assassinate him was not what we think it is. It was not in Butler. It was when Amy Coney Barrett gave him
can you hear me?
The virus.
Hey, Mike, forgive me. Yeah, forgive me, Mike, for interrupting on you. Grant, hey, brother. Just wanted to give you a call because tonight, I really just was kind of shooting the breeze with Joseph Gibson, who was running the radio broadcast for the Republic for 10 years. He came on and we were just shooting the breeze. I was late starting the broadcast tonight, and he invited a fellow on that just came on. His name's Mike, and I just started recording and said, tonight we'll just kind of shoot the breeze, so to speak, and discuss some things. And it's kind of an interesting topic. I thought I'd let you kind of join in for fun to overhear and put your 2 cents in. But in a quick recap, because we only just started recording a few minutes ago, Joseph was talking about the big thing now in the mainstream media is this thing about Donald Trump, talking about ending the Fed, and then Mike started bringing up to point here, what happened the last time a president said he was going to end the Fed, right? John F. Kennedy, right? They killed him. So that's kind of what we were just talking about. But I'm sorry for interrupting you, Mike. I just wanted to get Grant on the phone with us for the fun of the conversation here. But go ahead and finish
go along with ending the Fed. We need to repeal the income tax because the Fed and the income tax go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, they have to abolish the Federal Reserve Act, sure. Yeah. Well, what do you think, Mike? I mean, or Grant, what do you think? I mean, do you think Trump's on the right side?
Well, here's my thoughts. Since when you brought Trump into the conversation, my mind goes back to, again, my usual mode of thinking, right, is that there's nothing but a bunch of psyops out there that are ultimately all designed to facilitate a new world order, one world government corporation, right? Because that's what they want. Break down races, break down gender identity, break down nations, merge everybody under one corporate umbrella, and they own the world. They own everybody, get everybody vaxxed and chipped and control them all, control their money and their finances through digital currency. I mean, that is ultimately their ultimate goal and objective. And if that's the case, which it is, then just about everything we hear out there that seems to be positive or seems to be something that's leading in a favorable direction is usually a temporary psyop just to entertain people or to give them some positive hope while they behind the scenes make some other little curveball. Kind of like when Trump was in office the first go round, right? When he was in office the first go round, the patriotic community was like, rah, 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 great. We finally got, a guy that cares about America. He's not a politician. He's a patriot. And man, look, he's doing great things. And man, we're having a great economy and he's fixing things up. Um, you know, there's a whole bunch of things we can say on the negative about Trump the first go around. Everything from, the first 3 years, every time he was on a stage talking about the economy being better, it was always there's more blacks employed, there's more Latinos employed, there's more Asians employed. There was never anything about the white man, right? There
Yeah.
was never anything about the white American. It was always boasting about what he's doing for the blacks, what he's doing for the Chinese, what he's doing for the Indians, what he's doing for so what was funny about that to me was how ironic that he has to exclude the increase in job opportunities for whites. Well, it makes sense because he's given all the jobs to the blacks and the Chinese and the Indians, and therefore the whites are going to actually diminish, right? And that is consistent with their agenda to begin with, right? Is to really that's their war is against the white Caucasian, European stock of persons to begin with. And we know
Yeah.
the reason for that. It's because they are the remnant of the biblical Israelites. That's just all there is to that. But we won't go down that deep conversation right now. I'll just say that that's an interesting kind of aspect that, depending on where you are in the circle of life, you could, if you're a white Caucasian European, you could take note of that. You could say, wow, yeah, that's true. The first 3 years Trump was in office on his first go around, every time he talked about, job employment increases and improvements in homes and improvements for job opportunities and economics, was always for anybody and everybody other than the white man. And then on his third year, he became pushing vaccines. He became pushing ventilators for people to die on in hospitals. He became, the guy that was being pushed off the stage by Anthony Fauci. So it is kind of ironic that the first 3 years, let's make it look positive. But on his fourth year, let's let the shit hit the fan. And that led to what? 4 years of total chaos with people being donned up on face diapers and receiving deadly poisonous jabs and facilitating their worldwide depopulation agenda, on top of the fact
Mhm.
that they were destroying our military, not only by creating the woke military, but by having all the military personnel jabbed and forced to get jabbed with the poisons. So that wasn't looking too good there. After his fourth year, things went to hell. And then the obvious rigged election. There's no question that Trump did win. There's no question that he did win his second term. Without question, he won. There's no question that ridiculous, fumbling, bumbling old fool geezer Biden did not win the election. They put him in
Mhm.
office, and I'm not just saying that to be funny. It's just a fact. I mean, all of America voted for Trump again, and he won. They did absolutely rig the election. It was a rigged election. Trump did win. Um,
That's a
but
fact. Yeah.
they allowed that to happen. And so at that
And
time,
to,
I believe, Trump knew that was part of the game. So now let's get everybody in a real downer so that now we can put you in again, and now they'll really believe in you. Of course, he lost a lot of supporters during the Biden administration because of the pandemic, but now let's put him in, and now all of a sudden he's talking all these great things, all these great, tremendous things are happening. We're in the golden age now, and he's going to get rid of the Fed, and he's going to get rid of taxes, and it's like another big psyop. Those are
Yeah.
kind of some of my thoughts. Let Grant put some thoughts in. If you got any thoughts on what I was saying there, Grant.
Well, I'll go back to the whole situation that you're in is due to what FDR put in place in 33 and completed it in around 45 or 48. His appearance of reality for reality itself. And The entire system is one big lie. The money's not real. The law's not real. The elections aren't real. None of it is real in relation to the republic. It's one big lie after the other.
That is
Bingo.
true. Yeah.
And Grant
Yep.
has a spectacular way of putting things very succinctly. And I just want to comment on what Grant said and then go back to you, Joe and Mike. That point that, again, Grant just brought it back down to the basics again. It's all a lie. It's all a facade. It's all an illusion. They created this
Fictional world.
Right. They've created this fictional world that the federal territorial government, Washington, D.C., the corporation that's owned by the crown, governs, to have, to assert themselves as being the sovereign authority over all of the sheeple, which are the 14th Amendments, which the Supreme Court has ruled are property and franchises of the U.S. government. So we're back to the reversal of roles, right? We know that in the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America, the people, and when we say the people are going to have to go back and listen to our first 10 videos. The people doesn't mean just anybody that's here that calls themselves an American. That's not the people. We, the people, are the people that founded this nation, and the people that founded this nation are dead and gone. And they said in their laws and their contracts and their treaties that they secured those blessings of liberty for themselves and their family, for their blood, their posterity. Now, and this is the point I was going to say, Joe, earlier, just before you came on, Mike. I was going to say I was really looking forward to you coming on again, Joe, because one of the significant things that I wanted to add to all the kind of dialogue we've had, during the first 10 videos, when Adam would come on and stuff, and we were talking about, who has rights and what rights does who have, is here's a huge point that was never brought up before, and I'm bringing it up now. Not everybody that existed. In other words, Joe, if we go back to saying, oh, what are you saying? Only those that were here at the time of our founding fathers who gave their lives in the war have rights. Well, they're the only ones that have all rights, privileges, and immunities. Those are the ones that are owners of the nation. Anybody else that comes over here as a visitor, I mean, all that can be substantiated. But beyond that, solidifying that, like another final nail in the coffin, is the fact, and this was pointed out to my son by KW, by the way, which I thought was a great point. Not everybody, Joe, not everybody that was here back during the establishment of this nation, before and during and just after the Revolutionary War, not all of them were in favor of the American Revolutionary War. They maintained their loyalty to the King of England as subjects.
Tories.
What's that?
The Tories.
The Tories, right. Yep. And as a result, they were dispersed. They were excommunicated out of the states. So when you consider that, Joe, it really bolsters the points I was trying to make on some of our early on videos where there seemed to be, remember, a big part of what I was trying to do was make it clear that, yes, there's a certain people that are entitled to all rights, privileges, and immunities. And I knew the problem was going to arise with certain Americans saying, well, what are you saying? My grandfather fought in World War I and World War II and this, that, and the other. And all that is irrelevant, even when you consider that, wait a minute, even if you fought in World War I, if you are a bloodline descendant of people who were opposed to the American Revolutionary War, who were Tories, who were in favor of the king, then how can you think you're entitled to any of the rights, privileges, and immunities that were granted to the American people who established the nation? That's a huge point.
The Constitution doesn't even apply to them. It doesn't matter if they were here prior to 1808 or not. And Bouvier's Law Dictionary makes that very, very clear with its definition of native citizen. So even if you're a white Anglo-Saxon, if your family was here at the time of the Declaration of Independence and assented to it, by definition, you are considered a native.
Can you get that definition?
You don't even have to be a red man. If you're an Anglo-Saxon and that's applicable to you and your bloodline, you are by definition a native citizen.
Yeah, that's such a profound. But Josh, please pull that up and read it for the record. Read it for the record.
The Supreme Court even mentioned that in Downs versus Bidwell.
Yeah, my son's going to pull it up, and then I'm going to let him read it,
Yeah.
because he read the definitions to me. The Bouvier's dictionary is the dictionary that the Supreme Court uses, and it's got not just the definitions of words, but it has annotations, it has paragraphs, it has explanations, right?
All persons
Here he goes.
without,
Go ahead.
all persons without regard to the place of their birth, who were born before the Declaration of Independence, who were in the country at the time it was made, and who yielded a deliberate assent to it, either express or implied, as by remaining in the country are considered as natives. Those persons who were born within the colonies and before the Declaration of Independence, who were removed into another part of the British dominions and did not return prior to the Treaty of Paris, would not probably be considered natives, but aliens.
There it is.
Okay, okay, hang on. What about though? What about, let me ask this though. As the Constitution for the United States is a contractual compact of sovereign nations, the law of contracts applies. So therefore, the common law principle is what? It's expressing, I can't, it's in Latin, I can't pronounce it, but I wish I could pronounce it. But if certain items or conditions are explicitly mentioned in a law or a contract or will, it could be inferred that for as what other similar items or conditions, right, not mentioned, are excluded, right? So therefore, posterity would not mean directly only bloodline, according to that right there, what I just read you, correct?
So that means
The Supreme Court
when
did rule, they did say that in order to.
Wait, hold on. My son was going to comment, and then I'll let you go,
There's a
Mike.
case where the Supreme Court said, in order for us to interpret, what the founders meant, we must, look to the preamble for the founders' intent. We must look to the preamble.
Okay. So real quick, before, not to cut you off, Mike, but in 1755, when Johnson published the posterity, right? When he went with this about posterity, because he published something on posterity, wasn't a term of exclusivity. It embraced the future populace. That's what his statement was from one of the founders. Now, I'm just saying one of them now.
But Alexander Hamilton, if you read Federalist Paper 2 and Federalist Paper 84, makes it he defines posterity in those two papers of the Federalist Papers and their intent of what the word posterity means.
And again, it's consistent.
okay.
Hold on, it's consistent.
So,
Mike wanted to say
right, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry, Mike.
okay, so I'll give you an example of what he's talking about with the contract. So, okay, part of my family came through France and through Canada, through Baltimore, and ended up down here in Louisiana. But that was before the Louisiana Purchase. So the Louisiana Purchase was a contract between the United States and France, those people who were living in the territory probably ended up by proxy becoming citizens because of that contract. If I'm correct on that.
I think he is.
I would agree, because the only citizenship that existed at that time was a state citizen.
Yep.
And when those
Yeah.
territories became states, until the 14th Amendment got put in place, but still those people that were, the 14th Amendment had nothing to do with the status of the people that existed previous to its creation.
See, my point is that that part of my family came down before the revolution, and they ended up going through, like I said, going through Baltimore, going through Maryland to get down to Louisiana. So they came through, they just passed through. All right. They only stayed in Maryland for a short period of time, and they came down to Louisiana. So that's the deal. And once it's like anything else, like Hawaii or Alaska. Well, Alaska was another one that was bought a contractual agreement, right? So and those people become citizens.
Yeah,
And
that's what you
became
just said, Mike.
citizens
Yeah.
as well. So that's the thing. Now, a lot of talking about the 14th Amendment, which basically the argument is that it doesn't apply to these people, these illegals, this invading army. It doesn't apply to them, which I seem to think it's true, but a lot of these asshole judges, excuse my language, that are blocking Trump on getting rid of these illegals who aren't our posterity. Okay, and that cannot be argued. They're not our posterity, right? So,
Yeah, let me comment on that, because this is where I think we've done a pretty good job. I've tried to, throughout the first 10, videos that we've posted on the website at TAPS, to make the point that the original constitutional republic that established this nation of ours, the United States of America, obviously it had a government that was in place that was unseated, that was I want, this is such a profound point. I want you to help me with it, Grant. I think Sandy Mariaki did do a good job with the video she did. She kind of went back into talking about how things happened during Abraham Lincoln's, administration as a result of the war, how Congress, was, how the government was put off during the war, but then when it was regained by the bankers, through the infiltration. Can you give us a little synopsis, Grant, in your words, of what happened, what kind of a description of the transition of how we went from our constitutional republic and whatever the government was for it at that time, and into how it now became where there is a federal territorial plane over there in Washington, D.C. called United States, which is a corporation that's acting as the government.
Well, the federal territorial plane was put in place by the authority of the people, the sovereign people who created the United States of America. And they created a separation of powers between the federal government and the states. And the states have their authority under the 10th Amendment. But that's a convoluted thing in today's world because of what Roosevelt did.
Yeah, I know.
And concerning back towards the citizenship thing, what he was talking about, how his family came over. Well, if you read that, is it Happenstadt case, the Supreme Court case, where it said, those who were here at the time of the founding of the country, there is no doubt of their citizenship. While as to the others, there may be some doubt or
Right.
questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and on
I'd
that
like to read
point,
that.
yeah, well, read it.
Is that what it says? Exactly what it says? Grant?
That's I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting it, but that's what it essentially says.
Okay.
All right.
Grant was just saying, was it Happenstadt case? Was that the one that said anybody prior to 1808, there's no question of their
Yes, Minor versus Happersett.
Minor versus Happersett, right? So Grant just kind of paraphrased it. And Joe
Okay.
asked if it was an actual quote. Grant said he paraphrased it. But would you say that it does convey that what that case is saying is that for anybody born prior to 1808, there's no question about their status.
There's no doubt.
There's no doubt. But
Others,
for any,
like his family that came over, they might be some questions, but under the law, I'm going to assume just the way I see it, if they came here before the 14th Amendment and they were in the territories, and then once those territories became a state, they would have automatically, to me, had to become a citizen of that state.
but
Because
even,
the only
hold on, let me,
citizenship that existed was state citizenship. There wasn't a U.S. citizenship at
right,
that time.
but let me add this caveat that obviously there was a process for what do they call it again? Not migration.
The Naturalization Act of
Natural, right,
1790.
Right. Obviously, there was a naturalization process in place because, again, if we go back to the point I made earlier, that there were some people here before, during, and after the Revolutionary War that did not assent to the war. They maintained their loyalty to the king, and therefore, how can they claim any rights, privileges, or immunities that were granted to the people of the states by the Treaty of Paris? They can't, and therefore, neither can their bloodline descendants. Right. So that becomes an interesting factor, which would basically make me say that, as Grant pointed out, there are those of us who there's no question we can prove our posterity. We can prove that we're blood. So we don't have an issue. For those of
Because
you,
we're an heir.
because we're an heir. For those of you that are concerned about what you may or may not have or your rights, it's incumbent upon you to bring it up. Otherwise, you're just going to be subject to that federal territorial plane and be a 14th Amendment citizen, whether you like it or not. Otherwise, you're going to have to do your due diligence to prove where you stand in terms of your status. Do you have the ability, the right under law to claim your immunity and your privileges and your status as a state citizen of the states and an heir? That's incumbent upon each individual, and that's what we're encouraging Americans to do today, because those Americans are the ones that truly have the lawful right and the lawful standing to even do something about this out of control government. Going back to our topic of Trump, he's just a figurehead for what? For the republic? No, he's a figurehead for the state, federal territorial plane, United States of America government. I haven't heard him come out publicly and say, I am the assuming the capacity of the president for the constitutional republic of the United States of America. I haven't heard him say that publicly. So all these Q psyops saying, oh, actually, he's the 16th president. He's not the 43rd because he took over for the republic. Well, he better say it publicly or it doesn't mean jack crap. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
Well, how could he say that? Because not one of the people in their capacity as state citizens who have the right to be an elector, not a voter, but an elector, none of them cast a vote for them, and they preclude you from casting a vote in their federal territorial plane unless you first agree to be a U.S. citizen.
Right. Now, on that note, Grant, that brings up, a question about, and this came from KW. According to KW, we do have an electoral college, and he makes the argument that those are the electors, that most likely they're all posterity, the ones that are at the electoral college, and therefore they are acting in the republic to elect him as the president of that federal territorial plane, which is the government that we, the people, established. So what would you say about, hold on.
They are electors within that plane and form of jurisdiction in the federal territorial plane.
Right, but who created that federal territorial plane?
We the people gave Congress the authority, and the best way I can put it, in the original de jure republic, when they created it, we the people, all the sovereignty devolved upon the people, not the states. Chisholm versus Georgia. And in that Hunter versus Lacey, it said that actual ownership of land, the allodium title, can only pass from sovereign to sovereign. And in King George III, in Article 1 of the Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War, said he gave all proprietary rights to all lands to those people.
Right. So I guess
so those people were the owners in the several states of the Union, and they established a federal form of government.
Right, but
the federal government had certain rights, but the states retained all. The states and the people, pursuant to the 9th and 10th Amendment, retained all other rights.
Right, but in terms of there being a president, in other words, because this is actually a new thought that's come to me for more clarification, Grant, because I've concurred and agree with you on everything we've discussed up to this day, and I still do. I'm just saying that now it's just an intriguing thought or question of, well, wait a minute, if we the people gave Congress the authority, but we, that didn't mean that they're putting a president in over there. We, the people, are still the ones responsible for putting a president into office, right?
Well, I would say that the founders, the people who created this country, it was never in their wildest imaginations that they would use Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, one of the granted powers that we gave them, to shut down the republic. And they created a corporation for the operation of the territory, the 10 Mile Square, in 1871, which they had every right to do, because within that territory and within that 10 Mile Square and the territories, Congress is sovereign.
Right, but still,
when they acted outside in legal relations to we the people and the several states of the Union, they were not sovereign. They were only granted certain enumerated powers, and that's all they have.
right, and that's why they have given remedy, like 1746-1. If we are in the Republic, we do have remedy. So
Right.
maybe they're doing a
That's
whole
what-
bunch of
what-
things. Maybe they're over there doing a whole bunch of things for their paupers and their citizens, their 14th Amendment citizens, that has nothing to do with us. But
Right.
but
They're being managed for the debt.
right, they're being managed for the debt. But going back to my point of the president, still, there's a president, whether it's the Republic or it's the United States of America. Even if they undid, or unseated the Republic or abandoned the Republic, there still needs to be a president. So, if the argument can be made that the electors in the Electoral College, in theory, if they are posterity, the people that are in the Electoral College, and they're saying, hey, we're over here in the Republic and we did create this federal territorial plane. You guys are supposed to do this for us. Whatever you want to do with all your, 14th Amendment citizens, that's your business because you're sovereign. But as far as the president goes, this is who we want to be the president. I mean, is that a possibility?
Let me ask you a question then.
Hold on, Joe.
Okay, so-
Hold on, Joe. I wanted Grant's thoughts on that.
Well, to me, what you're saying, if it was true, then Trump would have to have an oath of office which he took, and in my opinion, was an oath of office in the form of that federal territorial plane government. I would have to see a separate oath where he took an oath to the Republic of the United States of America.
Or even if he said United States of America, not just United States, because that's
Well,
what.
sometimes they use that, but I mean, essentially, everybody talks about the yellow fringe flag, that it means admiralty and it means this. No, that flag means that you've just entered in to a court that's operating within the jurisdiction of the federal territorial plane.
Right, but
and you're operating in commerce under UCC.
Right, but again, see, this is a novel thought that's just come to me, Grant. It's almost like a revelation, really, because I'm just kind of now realizing we've agreed on everything and we still do, and it's almost like a revelation that has hit me. Could it be, even given that they've got their fringe flag showing that they are a federal territorial plane, that nonetheless that Electoral College, assuming that, just hypothetically, that they are posterity and that's why they are the Electoral College, they're saying that yes, you are the federal territorial plane over there and you are limited in terms of what you can do with we the people, but with your 14th Amendment citizens, you've got the sovereignty to do whatever you want. However, we're electing this person to be the president. I mean, could that not be a possibility, regardless of the flag? Because again, the president is over there in that government, period, because that is the government of the people. But they are essentially
All right, I
governing.
gotta mute myself real quick, Mike.
Hold on, Joe. Yeah, they're
I gotta mute
essentially
myself.
governing.
All right.
They're essentially governing two classes of people. They're governing, which is why they would have 1746-1 and 1746-2.
No, that's a mistake right there. That's one thing I was going to go over. That 1746-1. So they had to put remedy in the law when they shut down the republic and went into a federal territorial plane. That's all it's being operated today, is over in the federal territorial plane. And they had to give you remedy in order for it to be constitutional. And so your signature remedy, if you want to operate contractually in an agreement, stipulation, or contract And if you want the laws of the republic to apply, whether you're a U.S. citizen or whether you're a state citizen, you have the right, if you want to operate in the republic and under the laws of the republic. But when you do that, these courts with the yellow French flag in them doesn't have jurisdiction.
Right.
And if you don't say anything, it's automatically assumed that you're operating under 28 U.S.C. 1746-2.
Right. And
A U.S. citizen can operate in the republic, but you were given the remedy, but nobody uses it.
right, which even really makes the point I'm making that much more explosive and powerful, because in theory, it could be here, that could be the missing link of this whole topic, of what you just said. That government, we the people created the government, but again, we all know that the Constitution, first of all, one of the things that Josh and I have recently been pointing out that we're not pointing out in our first 10, discussions that we recorded, is that people are always talking about the Constitution for the United States of America. That's not what's important. What's important is the Constitution, your state constitution. That's the one that matters, is your state constitution. The only thing that the Constitution for the United States of America, or the Constitution of the United States of America, has to do with is the separation of the people from that federal territorial plane. It puts the restrictions and the limitations on the government over the people. That's all that is. That's just the people's contract for the government. All right, you're over there, government. You got nothing to do with us. We have all rights, privileges, and immunities. We're Americans and we're over here. So if that's the case, and anybody can opt to be in that republic, granted, they not anybody can have privileges and immunities. The Supreme Court has already ruled that. The only ones that are rightfully, logically, common sense wise, lawfully entitled to rights, privileges, and immunities are bloodline heirs, because it's their ancestors that created the nation. And that's perfectly fine. But that doesn't mean that not anybody can say, you know what? I'm in America. I'm an American. I claim the Republic. I claim 1746-1. You, government over there, the founders of this country said that you had a limited right to do what you wanted to, what you were going to do, and you have your sovereignty to do what you want to do in commerce. That's your thing. But I am using my remedy to be over here in the Republic. Now, you might not have all privileges and immunities, but you are now not subject to their federal territorial jurisdiction.
Well, I would say go down and register to vote and sign your name and put 28 U.S.C. 1746-1 beside your name. Go get a driver's license, and when you put down your signature, put 28 U.S.C. 1746-1 beside your name. Go get a bank account and do the same thing, and watch what happens.
Well, again, that would be that's kind of a oxymoron, because we do know that all those things you mentioned are commerce and contract issues over in the federal territorial plane.
The federal territorial plane,
right?
And conducted and enforced by a state in the federal territorial plane.
Right, conducted by a state in the federal territorial plane.
So this is my point, that I don't think people are grasping what I'm saying. Okay, so the people, as a state citizen, and I'm not saying that other guy who said his family was here, he might be able to use that and claim it. He has a right to claim and go back and claim to be a state citizen. I'm not saying he can't do that. I'm just saying, if you make the claim, you need something to back you up. And if you're an heir and you go back to those people who fought to create this country, that's pretty good evidence that you have the right to claim the status of your forefathers.
Right.
Okay. So those people, if, as the people of we the people, the original people, if you go back to them, those people are the owners of this land here in the several states of the Union.
Right.
Exclusive of the insular possessions of the United States. So, so if you're one of those people and you have that status, then the state that state that we created that joined the Union pursuant to Article 4, Section 4, our states joined the Union. This new state that was created by an act of Congress and put into effect by Roosevelt in his New Deal, created in Title 28, 81 through 131. Those states only exist in the federal territorial plane, and those states never joined the Union.
Right. However,
Okay.
let's use Florida as an example, because the point you just made is right. Those states that were established by Congress in 28, Title 28, that's a federal territorial plane state, meaning
Right.
really an overlay, a jurisdictional thing, where
Right.
yes, they can regulate commerce. There's laws and codes and statutes that they use to regulate commerce, but there still exists the state of Florida that is in the Union. And
Yes, but
and
nobody's home.
what's interesting is Governor Ron DeSantis. I found it fascinating the other day when I saw him doing a video talking about, hey, we're Florida. We're the free state. We're a free state of Florida. And you know what? Why are people paying taxes on their home when they already paid it off? Once you buy it, it's your property. You should own it. You shouldn't be subject to anybody else and have to pay taxes on it. So he's talking in a common law fashion about
Yeah.
if you live in Florida, period. He's not distinguishing, citizen or American or
Right.
14th Amendment. And he's saying you should not have to pay state, which is a great thing. I'm glad to hear him saying that. It's almost like we need to have a talk with Trump and every governor of every state and let them know, hey guys, are you aware of the fact that there's a federal territorial plane that's all about commercial corporate
Okay.
jurisdiction with codes and
Yeah,
statutes, but we the people do have common law rights, and again, Florida is a common law state. It claims itself to
But he's
be.
not in the common law.
Right.
He's not operating under common law.
He thinks he is.
Well, he may think he is, but he's not.
Right, but this is one of the problems we have.
That was the last switch in time, because you have to really understand the switch in time cases. When Roosevelt tried to put his New Deal in, and he was going to pack the court, and the courts knew they were going to get packed, and they were afraid what was going to happen. If Roosevelt packed the courts, it'd really get bad. So they switched. They switched from viewing their court cases from being in legal relations between a state citizen and the United States and one of the several states of the Union to over here as a U.S. citizen and legal relations with the United States. Now, the difference is state citizens are the owners and sovereigns in legal relations to the several states of the Union and the United States of America. U.S. citizens are property and owned. So now I go back to my original position. You are either on this planet in the legal, political, and legal system, you are either one of the owners, like King Charles. He just visited his land up here in Canada recently.
Right.
You see him go up there and visit all his subjects.
Right.
He owns those. He owns those people. They're his subjects, and he owns that land. And the reason he went there was because Trump's trying to annex some of his land and some of his people. And he's going up there and claim. That's his way of claiming his property.
But wait a minute, because you said Trump's trying to annex some of his property. If the federal territorial plane is a corporation that's owned by the crown, that's kind of a contradiction of terms. That's like saying
I don't know that corporation is necessarily owned by the crown.
I've heard from various sources that if you research and look into it, that
Now, I have a question. Okay. It can be argued that the Revolutionary War really didn't end until 1814, when President General Jackson came down here to Louisiana and had the Battle of New Orleans, right? Because the British came back, right?
Yeah.
To try to get everything back, So, and there was the Treaty of Trent and all that stuff that ended that up, because we won that battle. Now, once we won that, I talked earlier how my people came through. They didn't stay in Baltimore and Maryland. They came through and came to Louisiana, all right? And they stayed in Louisiana until they came before the revolution and before the him buying the president buying Louisiana, right? So once that Battle of New Orleans takes place, and hundreds of our fellow Louisianians join that battle, you know, then what happens? Do they become citizens? I think Louisiana, I think they became citizens at that point when they joined that battle to help defend, Louisiana, the United States at that point. But that's another argument for another day, and that's the thing. You've got these people that, you look at what's going on with these judges. You talk about remedy. There's supposedly remedy. Well, remember, Texas tried. I believe Texas tried in the election of 2020 to sue. I believe it was Colorado or one of the other states because they claim it was remedy for them, for that particular state because of all the fraud and stuff that was taking place. That particular state had basically negated the votes of the Texas citizens, the citizens of Texas, right? And well, the courts didn't buy it and all that stuff, and came up with this bullshit stuff about standing. They didn't have standing, but that
Did you read the court case that Texas brought to the Supreme Court? And the Supreme Court stated he went through all this lengthy detail. I mean, he really laid a lot of stuff out. But in the end, the Supreme Court merely replied that the state of Texas failed to state a reason as to why they would have concern as to what would have happened in another state.
Well, I mean,
see,
that goes
attorney
back
general
to
down there. He's probably a lot smarter
a
than
lot
me.
of this. A lot of
If he had read the
people,
switch in time cases, he might have figured out why
right?
Texas
People,
would have had a reason to be concerned
keep,
what happened in another state.
yeah, people keep saying at the time kept saying that Trump lost all these cases in the courts because he lost, right? Well, the problem is a lot of these cases that he brought up that he was a party to, these judges said, well, you don't have standing. You don't have standing. How did it hurt you? What happened in the state of Arizona or in the state of whatever, Georgia or whatever? How did it hurt you when everybody knew it hurt him? Because he was he won the election. Everybody knew. Everybody kind of figures. Everybody kind of knows that he won the election, but that's not the point. The question was the court. The court came up with
I think one thing you're missing.
Hold on, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I think one thing you're missing is that once they switched, the Supreme Court in Downs versus Bidwell said that the Constitution applies and does not apply depending upon the legal relations of the parties. And see, the legal relations of a state citizen in legal relations to one of the several states of the Union and to the United States of America, the federal government, is entirely different from the legal relations of a U.S. citizen in legal relations to one of the states. And the difference is those people are sovereigns. They're the creators. Go
ahead.
The other status, U.S. citizen, was created by the state. And a maximum law is that the creator always controls. So we created the United States of America. The United States of America created U.S. citizens.
So now, attached to that, makes sense of the fact that you said anybody, even a U.S. citizen, can claim to be in the Republic.
Yeah, they can go back under the laws, but they cannot. But that doesn't mean that you see. Before Roosevelt did the switch, they were U.S. citizens in the Republic. and they had established legal relations. And the first Supreme Court case that dealt with those established legal relations of this new class of citizens was the slaughterhouse cases. And in that case, they said that in legal relations, the U.S. citizens in legal relations to the several states of the Union, the first 8 or 9 amendments, or the 10th amendment, I think the first 10th amendments did not apply to them in legal relations to the states. However, they would have applied in legal relations to the United States at that time. And they also went so far to say that these new class of citizens do not have any privileges or immunities pursuant to Article 4, Section 2, nor do they have any privileges and immunities pursuant to the Privileges and Immunities Clause in the 14th Amendment. So you see, the legal relations of the parties is dependent upon their status, the jurisdiction, and that's why in Downs versus Bidwell, the Supreme Court, because our system of federalism that we had, the Constitution applies and does not apply depending upon the legal relations of the parties.
Right, but
Now-
again, the legal relations of the parties is ultimately going to come back down to, frankly, something that Eric Dingus has brought up several times, and that is that your political status is not a judicial matter, right? That anybody can claim whatever political status they choose. And therefore, if a person is claiming that they're in the republic, right?
Yeah.
They are essentially endeavoring, and I'm putting this in context with the point you made. It's clearly been made known. You referenced it several times over very well, that the Supreme Court had to make rulings essentially to safeguard the rights, privileges, and immunities that were granted via the Treaty of Paris to the founders of this nation. They had to do that. And that makes perfect sense. Joe, I hope you're following what I'm saying. That would make perfect sense that they would have to navigate in the Supreme Court to say, we need to uphold and secure and safeguard the rights, privileges, and immunities that belong to the state citizens who are the people who founded this nation, of which anybody born prior to 1808, there's no question about them, and their posterity, which is their blood lineage. We have to protect that. And they're the only ones that have certain privileges and immunities that others might not have, i.e. being an owner, i.e. being able to have allodial title, as that only passes from sovereign to sovereign, and probably a few other things.
To travel on your own roads, because these roads out here belong to the people.
Right, now that's the point I'm trying to get at, is this is where obviously we know that a great many people in the patriot movements, whether they are posterity or not, are making claims, seemingly justifiably so, right, that, hey, I have a right to travel because the Supreme Court has even ruled I have a right to travel freely, uninfringed with no, if I'm an American, I have a right to travel freely, uninfringed with no fees and registrations or licensure or nothing else because I have a right to travel. And therefore, there would be certain, that's why they take the position of, hey, I have a right to travel and your codes and statutes are only for commerce. I'm not operating in commerce, right? That's basically the jargon of the patriotic movement that's out there right now, of people that are trying to stand up for their rights, whether they are posterity or not. Hey, those are commercial codes. They have nothing to do with me as an American having the right to travel.
Right.
So that,
And that's why they're wrong. I can tell you why they're wrong and why they lose in court. Okay, so there's a case that says that U.S. citizens, and say U.S. citizens They are citizens of the District of Columbia and the 14th Amendment because they're citizens of the United States. They're not citizens of the states. And and they, pursuant to the 14th Amendment, they have the right of residency in the several states, but they're not the inhabitants. They're not the owners of the land.
Stop it, Ranger.
So I think there's a Supreme Court case. I don't remember its name, but it said a U.S. citizen, upon leaving the District of Columbia, loses the common law right of travel.
Wait, where's that at?
I'll have to look it up, but there's a case that I believe it's a Supreme Court case, and they said there that a U.S. citizen, upon leaving the District of Columbia, and entering into one of the several states of the Union, loses the common law right of travel.
Well, that suggests that when they're in the District of Columbia, they have the common right law.
Maybe so, but that was that. So you always have to think abstractly when you're reading these cases. When did they say it? Because
Right.
see, after Roosevelt did the switch, everything changed.
Right. Well, you're going to need to look that one up for us, Grant, because I mean, we're making this point and it's something that's significant. We need to put our,
And you talked about somebody, Eric, saying that, anybody can just choose to be a state citizen. Okay. Well, let's say I walked across, like to be a state citizen of the Republic. Well, all these 21 million people, Trump said, just entered the country illegally. Can they just walk up there and say, "Oh, I'm a state citizen"?
right.
Do they have the right to do that? And all these other people, if that's true, see, the 14th Amendment would never been necessary to put in it as an amendment. But see,
right. That's a good point.
The case, what was it, the Dred Scott decision? Those Supreme Court justices clearly laid out the distinction and said why Dred Scott could not be a citizen of the Republic. And that case has never been overturned by the Supreme Court. The only thing that changed was the Congress, after the Civil War, created a new class of citizenship, giving those people who could, according to the Supreme Court, could not become state citizens of the Republic.
Right, but let's say
a new citizen.
Right, you said it was never overturned by the Supreme Court. So let's say the New World Order gangsters that are behind the infiltration and corruption and takedown of the United States of America eventually achieve their goal of getting nothing but multicultural, multiracial, LGBT community individuals into the seats of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court decides to overrule all these cases because they got their screwball way of thinking people in there.
And that's why it's important that those who do have the right that are the owners that can claim ownership, a allodial title to the land, and that status that they have, because see, the legal relations depends upon those things, and claim to be within the jurisdiction of the Republic, they would have standing to make a claim in the Supreme Court right now.
Right.
Okay, so let's just put that into perspective right now. Now, I'd like for anybody to tell me where in the Constitution that we, the people, granted Congress the right to grant people from foreign countries to come here on our lands and grant them residency.
Right.
There's no place in there because, see, the 14th Amendment, the condition precedent to being granted residency within the state is that U.S. citizenship status. Now, there are millions of people here on our land today, which that federal territorial government has given the right of residency.
Right. Let me interject on that. I just made the very profound and substantial and very significant point a minute ago about if they can get their multicultural Indian, Asian, Black, people from all around the world, Hindus, Muslims, LGBT community, gangs, people, all those types of people, if they can get them into their offices of politics, which they've been doing, and eventually get them into their seats in the Supreme Court, then they're going to get what the hell they want all the time, because those are the lunatics that are going to vote for them, what they want. So that would also apply to the point you just made.
Yeah.
And refresh me on that point, because I wanted to connect that, because there's a connection there as well. What was the point you just made again? I lost it.
That we, the people, never granted Congress the right to grant residency to anybody.
Right. Okay, that brought back my point. So now that's why they are also, frankly, trying to push illegal immigrants into here, frankly, so that they can just grant them U.S. citizenship.
Yeah.
At will, grant them. Hey,
that's what I'm saying.
come over and serve in the military for 2 years, and we'll give you U.S. citizenship. Come across the border and tell me you're a poor person from another country who's having a hard time. Come to the land of the free and the home of the brave, and we'll care for you. Come here, and we'll just give you your U.S. citizenship. That's what they're trying to do, even with all these illegals.
Right. But that's the point I keep making. It's been a long, long time since one of the owners, a state citizen, where if you read in Article 3, it talks about citizen. And
Joe,
it's a capital C citizen.
Joe, did you hear all of everything we were just discussing over the last 2 minutes? Did you hear it? And if you did, do you not see how that drives the point home of how serious this is about getting the posterity, bloodline, privity of blood, heirs, owners of this country into the political seats to be able to change things? And I guess Joe didn't hear me, or he'd have come back on. So he probably missed that. But to me, that is such a profound, significant.
It's going to come down to this: either the people and their status as state citizens gives them the right under Article 3, under the Controversies Clause, and the standing to walk into that Supreme Court. And if we're correct that those Supreme Court justices have 2 oaths of offices, one in the federal territorial plane and one in the Republic. If they do have one in the Republic, that means if you walk in there as a state citizen, those judges up there are your trustees.
Let me ask you a quick question on this, because this might answer a question that even Alex was always asking. Well, what's the oath, Grant? Where can I find the oath? What grant is what oath? Could it be, Grant, that because we know what they're going to say, what, I swore an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Could it be that the oath is simply either, I hereby solemnly swear or affirm to uphold the laws of the United States of America is one oath, or I hereby solemnly swear to uphold or affirm to uphold the laws of the Constitution for the United States of America? Could that be the oath? Is simply a difference of those?
Yeah, right. That's the form of the oath. Which jurisdiction did you take the oath in? And the reason I said that is because those Bunsen brothers who brought that case all the way to the Supreme Court, I guess it was concerning the election. I heard one of them being interviewed by Greg Hunter, and he was talking about his case and all the things they went through to get to the Supreme Court. And he said, "Oh, by the way, did you know?" Because he talked about all the research and everything he had to do to get that far, to be able to get into that court. And in his research, he just mentioned it as a bythought. He said, "Oh, by the way, did you know that the Supreme Court justices have 2 oaths of offices?" And when he said that, I went, aha, maybe that's why.
Right.
So the bottom line for me, there's a narrow window of time. If the people do not awaken and take back their sovereign power in legal relations to that federal territorial government, because that's not our government. See, our government was a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That government up there is a government of Congress, by Congress, and probably for the central bankers.
Right.
But if we don't go up there and start making claims and going against. I mean, there's multiple ways you have standing to go against it, because does our enemy not use lawfare against us?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, they do all the time. But if enough people, we the people, do not wake up and take back our power and our authority and start doing something legally, then pretty soon we were not going to have that chance. Just like you said, it'll be replaced, and it'll come down to this: either there'll be a civil war and we take back the country, or this nation will go into oblivion and it'll turn into a third world country.
Right. That's where we're at.
That's where you're headed.
Yeah, that's how important it is for people in this country that are Americans who know that their blood has been on this land since before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, particularly those who know that their forefathers fought in the American Revolutionary War to get their shit together.
Yeah, they created their own country. They got recognized in the Treaty of Paris as sovereigns, and then they used that newfound sovereign authority recognized in international law to create their own country.
Yep. All right, let me go ahead and end this recording on that note. That'll give people that hear this video something to think about, I would imagine. So let me just end this recording here.